Morning, Cornerstone. Okay, a few of you are there. That's okay. We just want to welcome you today. My name is Pastor Rodney. I just get the great privilege, of every once in a while getting up here and getting to preach. And I'm so thankful to Pastor Mark and Pastor Deb that, he gives us the opportunity every once in a while to get up here and really share our hearts with you. And just before we jump into the Word, I want to just share one thing that's kind of upcoming starting this week. The last couple of weeks, you've kind of heard Pastor Mark talking about what we call our CCB, or Church Community Builders. Like, we got a lot of C's out there because of Cornerstone, but Church Community Builders. This is really our infrastructure, our database that is inside of our church that kind of runs all of our admin stuff in there. The beauty of this is that you have the ability to log into that and either update your information, update your profiles, do whatever you kind of want. You can search for small groups in there. You can register and sign up for events that are going on. You can even get in there and log in and actually pull your own giving statement for the year. So that's one of the highlights for me. When you mail out 1,000 sheets of paper over, tithes and offerings and giving those donations back out to you as tax write-offs, it's one of those things where it's absolutely wonderful. Just click a button and the emails go out and let you have a link. It's beautiful for me, And so, but I just want to let you know that at any point, you can go to our Cornerstone Chapel homepage right up on the right-hand upper side there. Click on the toggle that has the menu that goes across there. Hit log in, and it'll simply walk you through the steps of how to get logged into the system and start working inside of the systems. And we are developing this more and more as it goes, so it'll continue to have more and more things operate or functioning inside of the systems. But I just wanted to let you guys know that this is an opportunity for you to really start to utilize this church community builder and really start to build a community inside of the church as well. And just so you know, so you don't get confused, it's a pretty easy process, but on your way out today, you'll actually receive a half sheet of piece of paper that gives you those instructions on exactly how to do it, and it'll walk you through that really simple and easy for you to do. Are we good? Okay, I got my promo out of the way, so I'm good. Have you guys been enjoying the Daniel Dilemma series going on? It seems like over these last few weeks that we just hear how excited everybody is about this Daniel Dilemma. And not Daniel as a person, but really Daniel as the book of Daniel as we go through it. If you remember, week 1, Pastor Mark taught and showed that, it was really about, Daniel and the identity crisis, and that the devil's coming in and really starting to change our identity and who we are. And we saw that in the lives of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and in Daniel, because they no longer were called underneath their real names that God had given them, but were called underneath the Babylonian names, which really they were trying to change the culture of who and their identity and their culture. And then week 2, we saw that Pastor Mark talked about standing firm. And we saw that kind of come up when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or as Pastor Mark referenced it, Rack, Shack, and Benny, if you're from the VeggieTale era, really how they stood firm in their beliefs in a culture that was really trying to change them and who they were. And they were really wanting the culture to change them, but really they wanted them to adapt to the culture and be different than what God had called them to be. And then last week, week 3, Pastor Mark talked about standing firm or loving well. And what the beauty of that one was is just that, look, we need to love people and love them back to Christ and not really condemn them and everything that they're doing. And that's just where those things are. And so this week we're going to look at something a little bit different, not really big difference, but just difference. We're going to be in Daniel 4 this week, and we're going to focus in on King Nebuchadnezzar a little bit. But what I want to bring to you is that what I really want to do is I want to show you what I believe to be like one of the greatest tricks the devil has for us, like something that he does that we don't even realize is happening the majority of the time. Like, our culture is so into this. Like, the devil is so tricky, and he's like a master deceiver, that he just does this so slowly over time that we don't even realize this thing. And it's called the Babylonian Mentality. Now, let me explain to you the Babylonian mentality, because when I say Babylonian, most people go right to the city. But we're not going to talk about the city, but we're going to talk about a mentality that we can find that happens inside of Babylon during this period of time, and how God really goes in there to try to correct or try to fix what the devil is going. And I just, I get excited because I think today we might be able to, slam the door a little bit on the devil for a few moments, and see what his greatest trick is and what's out there, and really look at this thing as far as the Babylonian mentality. Now, when I say Babylonian mentality, it's really where our culture has begun to emphasize itself and start to elevate us and minimize God. You see how that's backwards? Like, they elevate who we are, and in the same time that we're elevating us, we're starting to minimize God and bring him down because we want to bring God down to our level. We don't necessarily, want God to be above us. And this is something that has been happening throughout the Bible. Like, it's happened in Genesis. It happens all the way to the end of the Bible. And I just want to show you how the devil's been using this little thing. And I want to show you a couple moments here just at the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis 3. Now, most of you know the story of Adam and Eve already, but this is just one little part where we can start to see what's happening, what the devil's doing. It says, "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Like, he started this thing way back at the very beginning because he just stated it right there. He just said it. He says, you will be like God. He didn't say God's going to remain above you and you're just going to understand a little bit more. He said, hey, I'm going to bring God down to your level. And he says, hey, I'm going to elevate you. And you're going to be just like God because you'll know the difference between good and evil. What about Isaiah 47? "Now then listen, you lover of pleasures, lounging in your security and saying to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. Both of these will overtake you in a moment, on a single day, loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and of all your potent spells. You have trusted in your wickedness and have said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge mislead you when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me." You see where the devil's going with this thing? Like, man, he is all over minimizing God, man. He is really trying to make us think that it's all about us. Like, we are in control of everything. And he's letting you know, hey, I'm gonna play some tricks on you here for a little bit, and you're not even gonna know it happens. Like, he's that kind of I don't want to say a person because he's not really a person, but he's that kind of guy. And he's gonna play well to trick you. Watch what he does when he starts to trick you. Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Like, he can't even come up with his own terminology, his own words, his own thinking process. Like, he wants to duplicate what God is doing, make a few little changes, and then make you think that it's all about you. So when he says, I am who I am, and then you go back into Isaiah and you look and you're like, oh, he just copied that because now he's saying, I am, and there is none besides you. Or how about this one? I love this one. This is one of my favorite ones. I just happened to read this on Thursday night and hear this, and I heard it, and I actually went right into the Bible, and I was like, I've got to go read that and where that is and check this out. And I added it literally on Friday night. And so 1 Peter 5, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Did you catch that word, like a roaring lion? Like, I have read this many times, and I've always thought, oh, he's going around, just like a roaring lion, but never picked up on that word, like a roaring lion. Like, he's not a lion. He's just going around roaring like one, trying to trick us into something we shouldn't be doing or minimizing God to bring it down because he's like, it's all about you. You got this. It's all about you. And he is being tricky, and he is going around and just trying to deceive us in our ways of our life and our culture. And we can see that in our culture. Like, think about our culture and how many things are starting to shift and change and really start to refocus who we are as Christians, as who we are as followers of Jesus Christ. And we can see a lot of these things starting to happen. And really, Revelation is another piece of the puzzle that goes all the way to the end. But Revelation 17, I believe 17:5, it says that the great Babylonian, the mother of prostitutes, the abomination of the earth. And so this Babylonian mentality, this thing that has been going on in Babylonian is really creeping into our culture down here in our age and really starting to change who we are and change our walk, and we don't even see it happening. We don't even realize it happening. We don't even know what's going on. Like, we're just kind of almost a little bit oblivious to what's happening. Now, this isn't something that, something that's new. Like I say, because we just showed you a whole bunch of stuff in the Testament Bible. But this isn't something new that's with Nebuchadnezzar either. Because, when we talk about Babylonian mentality, it's something that has been bred into him, something that he has taken on in his culture, and he's just unwilling to shift it because he just wants to be who he is and think about how big he is and everything he's done. And we can see that when we look at a piece of Nebuchadnezzar's life. It's not in the Bible. This is actually something that I found, and it was from his inaugural speech. When he first became king of Babylon, when he was the age of 29, his father had passed away. He takes over being the king of Babylon, tongue twister today. And he says this, and listen to this very carefully, and we're going to watch this. And it says, upon descending to the throne, Nebuchadnezzar spoke to the gods, little g, in his inaugural address, saying, O merciful Marduk, which Marduk is the Babylonian god, what they call to be the Babylonian god. And he has some 50 different names that is associated with his one name, Marduk. May the house that I have built endure forever. May I be satiated with its splendor, attain old age therein, with abundant offspring, and receive therein tribute of the kings of all regions from all mankind. Now let's just get a little real with King Nebuchadnezzar. This guy's arrogant. Like, if you guys ever had somebody around in your life that you can kind of just, you can picture them already, because it's just like this guy comes into the picture and they'll change the conversation and refocus it. Like, you'll be saying, hey, this is what's going on. And they're quick to refocus. Oh, no, check out what I'm doing. Check out what I got going on. Check out my new car, or check out my new boat, or I was out all weekend long. I mean, we all know, right? We all know those people. They're out there, but they're almost this sense of arrogance that goes with them. Or there's a sense of entitlement. And we can see that in our culture huge, like really big, because entitlement has started to take over our culture, because suddenly we think that this is Rodney, man, I deserve this. Regardless of whether I work for it or don't work for it, I deserve this. And we start to see this come into play, and it really is changing who we are as a culture. And our culture, we as Christians are adapting to this culture. And we're like, well, if everybody in the culture is doing it, must be okay to do it. If everybody says it's okay, then we all do it. I mean, you guys have had your moms. I think our moms have always said this to us. Hey, if your friend goes jump off the bridge, are you going to go jump off the bridge with them? I mean, when you're 16, that's like the key line that your mom is, like, they're just waiting to pull that line out and say that to you, that, hey, you going to go jump off the bridge with them? And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, yeah, you are, because we're changing our culture. And we're starting to adapt to this thing, and we're jumping off the bridge right along with everybody else, because everybody else is doing something. So what I want to do today is take a look at Daniel chapter 4. And I'm going to go in through Daniel chapter 4, and we're going to look at King Nebuchadnezzar a little bit in this chapter and really see God's response to this culture change and what's going on. And then try to give these guys some real experiences, some real life stuff from myself and personal stuff maybe, and just really show you how culture's taken over and really what God's response to this and what we should be doing according to the Bible. Are you guys ready? Okay. Daniel 4, starting right at verse 1. Now, what I like about this one is I want you to kind of just pay close attention to how many times I, me type thing is getting ready to come up. I, King Nebuchadnezzar, am writing this letter. I am sending it to the people who live all over the world. I am sending it to people of every nation, no matter what language they speak. May you have great success. I am pleased to tell you what has happened. The Most High God has done miraculous signs and wonders for me. His signs are great, his wonders are mighty, his kingdom will last forever. His rule will never end. I was at home in my palace. I was content and very successful. Now, come on, I mean, it doesn't really get too much more arrogant than that, because he's like, hey, I'm going to write a letter not just to Babylon and let these people know. I'm going to write it to the whole world, for all the language, for all the nations to see what God has done, not for my kingdom, but what God has done for me. And I'm going to let that be known. And when I do that, back in his opening address, I want you all to contribute things to me. I want to attain more and more and more. And it's all going to be about who King Nebuchadnezzar is. I'm going to be big dog on the block, and it's all going to be about me. I mean, this guy is bragging, arrogant. It's all about him. It's all about him. And we start to see where this is really going to go. And then we go on to the next one, Daniel 4. We're going to start in verse 5. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. I just want you to remember that word, terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called, and I can't say these words, but Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy God is in him. Now, check this out, because what in the world just happened there? King Nebuchadnezzar goes out, calls on all of his men. He had a dream that terrified him and scared him. And because he couldn't understand what was going on, he called out for all his wise men to come into play to look at this. And I think it's funny. I don't think it's funny. I think it's really interesting when we see the separation of the wise man, and then we see a separation of Daniel, because who came first? All of his ways. All of the wise men came in first, and they couldn't interpret the dream. And then finally, Daniel comes into play. And it's like, well, what do you think is going to happen? What, are you getting confused? It's almost as if he's talking back to our culture today, where we try everything we can do before we ever call on God. Nebuchadnezzar has seen some great miracles up to this point. He's seen Daniel... He saw the three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He saw them pulled out of the fiery furnace. He saw the fourth person in there. He saw in chapter 2 that Daniel came in, and without being told what the dream was, God gave him the interpretation of the dream. So Nebuchadnezzar is really starting to see that God is God, and God is the most sovereign and most high God. But yet Nebuchadnezzar's not willing to give credit where credit is due. He's like, no. I'm going to talk to these guys over here first, and I'm going to try to minimize your God, because you know what? My way, my guys can do this too. You ain't got the only guys that can do this. But this is the second time in the first 4 chapters that those wise men could not interpret the dream. And then we see Daniel coming in with God and really saying, hey, here's the interpretation of the dream. Here's the dream. And so he's excited, almost excited to kind of tell him what's going on. And he tells Daniel the dream that is getting ready to happen. Now, I want to stop there for just a quick second, because I want to kind of put this into perspective of our culture today. A lot of times as a culture, we do this and we don't even realize that. And that's why I kind of brought Megan's bicycle with me today to kind of get up here on the platform because I just want to illustrate something for you of the way that we do things and we don't even realize it. See, because sometimes in our lives, we get on our bicycles and we get up here in the front and hopefully not like fall off or mess up or anything because, it'll be out there forever. But anyway, we get on and I just want you to picture that this is our journey in life. This is our life journey. Like we get on our bikes and we just kind of start just cruising along with like everything is going well. Man, I'm married. I got a great family. I got a great job. Look at all these things I got. And as you go around your life, you're just kind of just cruising along. There doesn't seem to be anything going on, and it's pretty well manageable. I mean, you can go anywhere. If you want to go right, you can go right. If you want to go left, you can go left. You kind of do anything you want to do. But if you have never ridden one of these bicycles, like has anybody ridden a bicycle with one of these little towy behind things like that? Like I did it a couple times and that was about enough for me. Because you know that when you get your kids on the back, like they have the ability, even when they're like 50 pounds, to shift you in your direction. Like your kids, like my kids, they know me and because of just my nature of my personality, like they get back there and they're like, oh, we're going to make dad fall off for a second. And we can do this by leaning to the right or leaning to the left. And then all of a sudden I stop and I just kind of coasting or I get off of it and I turn around and I'm like, stop it. Stop it. Like if you want this to be fun today, you're going to stop whatever you're doing. And so, they all start laughing. But do you realize we do this with God in our lives? Like we get on our bicycles and we kind of just start like cruising along and just everything seems to be going around. And then all of a sudden, God's like, hey, I want you to go over there. And he starts to tilt that bicycle around and he starts to tilt because he wants you to go that way. And you're trying to like, God, stop it. That is not the direction I'm going in. Stop it. I'm going this way. And God's like, but I really want you to go that way. And you're like, hey, don't even talk to me right now. Like, come on, we're there. And so we see this thing where we minimize God and put him on the little wee bike, the co-pilot back here in the back of our lives, and we set him back there and we just cruise along. And then suddenly life starts to happen. We start to go uphill because we have a little struggle in our marriage and our families. We start to have a little struggle in finances, whatever aspect of life, but you start to have a little bit of a struggle. And as you're pedaling, you're like, okay, you got to lean forward. You're starting to go uphill. You might even have to stand up a little bit to really put your weight behind the pedal as you're going up. And while you're doing that, all in the same sentence, you're turning around like, God, can you give me a little help here? Like a little pedaling. Like my kids would have their feet off the pedals and be like, oh, take me wherever you're going. And I'm like, no, we're going uphill. We're struggling. And you turn around and you can't get off the bicycle, sorry. You sit here and you look back at God and you're like, God, a little help in my marriage would be nice. A little help in my finances would be awesome. A little help here might be better. Why aren't you pedaling? And you're sitting back there telling God to stop in one moment because that's not the direction you're going to. And then you're begging him to help you in the next one. You get that? Like, that's some serious stuff. Like, you don't even realize we're doing it. Like, we're just out there living life good, thinking, oh. And then as soon as a little trouble runs, as soon as life starts getting it's hard, okay, difficult, then we turn around and we start calling on God to help us, but we put him back there and we minimize God right where he's at because we don't want him to control our lives. We don't want him to help us out. One of the things that I think a lot about that, we see come through the church is, we start seeing these things that just, they're continuous in the church and they just come back and forth. And one of those things is really like things I just don't understand and things I don't get. Like you just, things that make you say, like I know that dates myself, like that's like 1990, but it's like things that make you go, there was a whole song about that thing. And it's like, man, as a pastor, like what in the world is going on at that we're minimizing God like this? One of those things is marriage. Now, let me just give you a little bit of disclaimer, because I said first service, I didn't want people to like email Pastor Mark and he'll come to work next week and there'll be like 200 emails there like saying something about what I'm getting ready to say. But I just don't understand like all of divorce. And I know divorce is a touchy subject for the church. Touchy, touchy, touchy. I get it. Personally, for many of you that may not know that I was divorced 22 years ago. I get divorce and it happens and I know the messiness of it and what goes on and, but I just don't, I don't get it. I know there's times that there are physical abuse and mental abuse and affairs and all this stuff that's hidden in the background and addictions that really affect the marriage. And really at some point, those marriages kind of, go their way. But what I don't get is when somebody comes into the office and they say, no, we're just not getting along. And you're like, what? And they're like, yeah, we're just not getting along. And it's kind of one of those moments where you just kind of look at yourself and you're like, okay, well, I've had that with my wife too, so that doesn't mean I'm getting divorced. And it's like, yeah, but she doesn't fill my needs anymore, or he doesn't do what he's supposed to anymore. And I kind of lose track on what that is. I get confused because I'm like, when did the marriage all become about you? When it's really designed, God designed it that it's all about your spouse. And yet you're turning this thing around and you're just like, in a divorce by then, but I did. I just don't get that, or you get like people that come in and they want to go through marriage counseling, which I'm all for. I love marriage counseling. I love connecting with people. And then all of a sudden people come in and they're just like, well, we've been kind of living together for these past, couple of years. And, really, what does the marriage really mean anyway? It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. Culture. If you'd have taken that back 50 to 75 years ago, that question would have never come up. It would have never been, let's go live together and try this thing out, see how it works. It would have been, hey, it's more than a piece of paper. It's a covenant. It's a commitment. But today, it's like, if you don't live together before you get married, you're almost the weird person in the group. Because I'm telling you, there's people that have come into the office and they're like, hey, we're just trying it out. And I'm like, trying what out? Because I know what they're saying, but it's like, again, Pastor Rodney just saying, hey, I'm going to make you say it for a second, But trying what out? And they're like, oh, we're just going to test the waters and see how it is. And I'm like, what are you, like buying a car? Come on, really? Are you buying a car here? No, you're marrying a woman that you're supposed to love with all your heart. You're getting a wife or a husband out of this thing. You're not test driving anything. Test driving it, you're going in thinking you're divorced already. You're backwards on it. And that's because we've minimized God as being the center of our marriage, our families, to down here to the bottom and just being like, hey, I'm going to do it my way and try it all out and check it out. If it doesn't work then I'm going to ask God to help me restore my marriage, which he is all about doing, restore my marriage and fix the thing, but I'm not going to do that avenue until I've weighed out every other option that I can do, just like King Nebuchadnezzar did. He called on all of the wise men, but the wise men couldn't answer the question. And then finally he goes in and talks about these other things. What about our families? What about when you think about your families and where your families are at, the destruction of the family? Oh my gosh. Just where it's gone over the last, we can go shorter than that, probably 20, 25 years, even at that. Nothing used to be open on a Sunday morning or Sunday at all. If you guys can remember some of those things, never was. It was always about, hey, you go to church and then you go to family's house. Now it's like everything's open and it's like, go to church, grab something to eat, and I'm going to take off and go somewhere. Or, hey, just for this small season of life, I'm going to go and I'm going to do a traveling sports team with my kids. Now, Please don't think bad about me right there, because I love sports, and my kids are in sports. But there's one place that I draw the line, and that's on a Sunday thing and a Wednesday thing. And that's personal for me and Wendy. Like, I give that information to families, like, hey, that's one place I draw the line on, because I'm unwilling to compromise my kids' future, my kids' salvation, my kids' personal walk with Christ. And it's just not a Wednesday and a Sunday thing. It's all week type situation. But when we start to teach our families that, hey, we can maybe, negotiate sometimes, and, we're just not going to go to church for 6 months because we're going to do this. And I don't know about you, but I just came out of the summer, and me and my wife, Wendy, we were like, hey, it's all going to slow down in the fall, so we'll be good. Yeah, it ain't slowed down in the fall. It's probably gotten busier. Like, devil's good about tricking you that way to think like, oh, you got to get back. Oh, here's the next thing for you. Oh, here's the next thing for you, because he's just going to keep that going until you figured out that that's what the culture does. And you think and wonder why our families are getting destroyed, why they're being taken apart piece by piece. Because culture keeps moving this direction to where the devil knows if he can destroy the family, destroy marriages, stop kids from getting involved, stop kids from having a personal walk with Jesus Christ, that he's going to stop, I won't say stop, but stop Christ as it goes. Here's the best one I hear all the time. Best one. And I just lost it. So we're going to move on. Sorry. Yeah, it was like right there in my head, and I just totally went blank, on that one. And so we'll just keep moving. So sorry about that. But, hey, these things, I don't know why this is. Like, this is like totally off topic, and I shouldn't do this because I web when I do this. But I don't know what it is about like this second. Like, first service was moving smooth. Second service, I get up here, and it's like, that the camera's on you, and you're like online, and you just like totally just blank out. And it's just like, I'm like, oh, it's great, Rodney. Like, here you are up here supposed to be preaching, and you just blank out on what you're getting ready to say. So bear with me there for a second. But you see the destruction of the culture, and you see the destruction of the families. We just see the destruction in our finances, because we think and sit back at our finances, and we're like, man, I'm living so much, like, so good. Look at all this stuff. But you're indebted up, like, past your abilities to even repay anything coming back. And you're like, what? Because culture has taught us, again, 50 years ago, you might have had a credit card for an emergency. Culture has now shifted to, if you don't have a credit card, you're totally insane. How do you pay for things? Well, I don't know. It's called cash, And so you're like, culture has shifted, and now it's bringing us to it, because the devil is sitting there saying, you don't need to give to God. You don't need to give to the church. Don't worry about that. That's nothing. Like, there's a lot of other, and he said, a lot of other people that'll give. You don't have to do your part. Okay, well, I don't know, but God's really in there that says, hey, be a cheerful giver. Be a faithful giver. First fruits. I give you everything you have, not for you just to keep it and make it all about you, like you're supposed to be helping the kingdom. You see where culture is really starting to shift that, and we're starting to really see those things just kind of go on? And then we get back to the dream, and just let me paraphrase this really fast. But the dream is told into Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar tells Daniel the dream that there is this great tree, and it reaches to the sky, and it's abundant, and it's lots of fruits, and it feeds everybody, shades everybody, provides for everybody. And it's almost like our culture is doing us the same thing, that you can provide and do everything yourself. You don't need God to do anything. And then it comes into the point where it says that the tree is going to be cut down, and the stump will remain bound by iron and bronze. But I want to look at that section right there, because there's something really important inside of this section that teaches us God's response to this dilemma. So we're going to go to Daniel 4:25. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times or 7 years will pass by you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and he gives them to anyone he wishes. Now, I don't know about you, but when we look at King Nebuchadnezzar's life and what's going on in Babylonian at this time of period, God has given King Nebuchadnezzar a lot of warning signs with what's going on. You know, he's doing all these miracles. He's doing all these great things. He keeps referencing that he's the most high God, that he's the sovereign one. You need to acknowledge him. And yet King Nebuchadnezzar is just like, I don't care. It's okay. We'll go on. You'll go on. And it's like, really? Like, God's giving you clues? Like, you know, sometimes when your marriage is just mixed up and out of order, God has given you a clue. Like, I'll personally tell you that, you know, year 7 to year 10, I really thought me and Wendy would be divorced. You know, like, there was nothing really good about our marriage at those 3 years of life. But God had to do some teaching in me because I was more like, woohoo, thank you, God, because I got a woman who puts up with me. And Wendy was more like, God, why did you ever do this to me? You know? But our marriage was out of order. Like, we had God there. He was there. He was present, but he wasn't in his rightful place. I had minimized God down to here and thought that I was going to make my marriage work. You know, and sometimes when our marriage starts to have difficulties and faults and things, it's God's really kind of warning to say, hey, look, I need you to reconnect your marriage to me, and I need you to put me back into my rightful place. When your finances aren't working like they should be, it's sometimes because it's God saying, hey, look, I need you to restructure your finances. I need you to rethink things that are going on because you've minimized me and taken me out of my rightful position. Same with our families. Sometimes we have to be restructured. Sometimes we have to look at our things and say, hey, are we really doing the things God wants us to do? Is it really him in the right place, or are we kind of putting him in the back burner of things? Daniel 4, going to verse 36. At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. I'm going to tell you what, like, all of these things that are happening in our culture and happening in our lives is really God calling for us to be humble. Like, you may not think that, but I'm telling you, there's only one of two ways that this thing can even happen. Like, we're either going to humble ourselves before God, or God's going to humble us. That's the only way. There's no middle ground on that thing. There's no middle road. Like, God's either calling us to be humble, or he's going to humble us one way or another until we acknowledge who he is. And until we acknowledge that he is in control of everything. Until we acknowledge that he has given us everything. Until we acknowledge who he is. And King Nebuchadnezzar is finally starting to see that 7 years of being drenched and eating grass out in the field, everybody walking away from him, nobody, no friends, none of his royal noble guys, everything has left him. Is there anybody there? Really? Like, honestly, like, is there anybody there that you just feel like you're alone? Like, there's nothing left around me. And God says, hey, look, if you humble yourself before me and acknowledge who I am, I will restore greater than it ever was before. Like, are we ready for our marriages to be better than they ever were? Are we ready for our finances to be better than they ever were? Are we ready for our families to be better than they ever were? Are we ready for people to say, man, you really got your stuff together? Say, no, I don't have my stuff together. God has my stuff together. God's doing this, and leaving the door for us to just love somebody well back into salvation with Christ. And then 1 Peter 5 says this, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to those who humble. Like, come on. Like, do you not want some of God's favor in your life? Like, God's favor in his little pinky is probably more than I could handle in my entire life. Like, God is that big. Like, I don't need to minimize God for who he is. God is in control of everything and provides everything to me. And I can be thankful for that. And God says, but if you're proud, I've got to humble you so that you realize where this is all coming from, that you realize how much I really love you and care for you and provide for you. I've got to humble you. And then I kind of want to back up into Daniel 4, verses 23. And I think that this is kind of where I've based my whole sermon around this one little section, this one verse 23. Watch. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven and saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass field. You know, you always wonder, why would God want to leave the stump? Like, if it was so bad, if it was so broken, why would he leave that stump there bound with iron and bronze out in the grass field? God always gives a way back. Always. No matter how broken you think things are, no matter how bad you've messed up, no matter if you think you're unworthy, think you're no good, it doesn't matter what you think, because God leaves the stump. You know, if you're, like many of us, we talk a lot about like our families and our kids, and I struggle there with you. I struggle there with you because, my two older sons have kind of stepped away, like they're, quote unquote, trying to find themselves. And they've kind of made that step where they're not going to church. I'm there with you. I don't have a perfect life at my house. But I love this because it says, even though the tree was cut down, there's a way back for them. Like, God's leaving a way back for them. And he's going to humble them, and he's going to work on them. But he also says, sometimes we got to fight for what we want. There's a story in Psalms where David was out fighting some battles and he came back. And when he came back, his women and children were all taken from the city. And there was a time there for David to mourn and really think. But after he mourned, David gathered to go back to get what the enemy had taken from him. And when you put that into perspective of life, that God leaves a stump to be restored to you, it makes you look differently at your families and your situations and where you're at in life, because God gives us a way to get back. And it's called humbling ourselves in front of him and going face down to him. And I want to invite you, guys, look, don't give up. On whatever situation it is, whatever's going on, God's got a way back for anybody and everybody. I'm going to share this one last verse with you as we close. James 4:10. Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. There's two things that I personally believe, that have to happen in our humbling and the humbling process. And it kind of goes like this, and it says that it was bound by iron and bound by bronze. And I think that those two things represent something really big in our life, fear being one of them. Like, I think iron represents the fear, because we're scared of what other people will think about us. Like, we're scared that, what is our culture going to say when we live totally different than everybody else? What is our culture going to say at our jobs when we're known as, Jesus freaks, Bible thumpers? I mean, we can go down the list of names that we've all been called at some point. They look at you and change their ways and make fun of you and pick at you, And then there's the second one. It's called bronze. And that's really shame. And shame that our lives are so messed up that we minimize God by saying, God would never want somebody like me. That we would take God and shrink him down to below every sin and brokenness, everything that's out there, that we think God is not bigger than all of that stuff. And that's where we've got to, as people, as a society, we have to change that and say, you know what? my God can restore anything and everything. My God is bigger than any sin, anything broken marriage, broken families, broken finances. He's bigger. He's going to give me the job I need. He's just really just one step of faith is all you're away from doing that. And I always like to end, talk about like my little visual aid, because it's kind of one of those things where a humbling process has to take place. And God's really been humbling me over the last couple of months and really just been pushing this into me like, Rodney, stay humble, stay humble, stay humble, please stay humble. And I'm like, God, I'm going to stay humble, and then moving from this seat here back to this seat here. There's the humbling. Because now no longer am I not sitting right there driving the boat, driving the bicycle, going where I want to go. I'm sitting back here and I'm like, all right, God, where are we going to go today? And God's like, oh, we're going to go over there. And I'm like, what about over there? And he's like, no, we're going over there. And I'm like, yeah, but that's level ground over there. It's a smooth ride. And that's all mountains over there. He goes, and that's why we're going there. And I'm like, but I like this view a lot better. And he's like, yeah, but I need you to go on this view. And I'm like, why you got to go over there and work so hard over there? He's like, because I need you to have faith in me. I need you to trust me. And I'm like, trust you that you're going to like kill my legs, like I won't be able to walk or do something, like it's going to hurt and be painful. And God's like, well, yeah, but I got you. And you're like, but you're asking me to have faith in you? What kind of faith is that? And God's like, well, this is what kind of faith I'm talking about. He's talking about a kind of faith that doesn't teach you to go through the storm or it doesn't teach you to go around the storm, under the storm, or above the storm. It teaches you to go through the storm and let him drive the boat. It teaches you to let him take you where he wants you to go through the struggle and the pain and the hurt. It teaches you that not only are you going to go through that, you're going to learn how to dance in the rain. And when you sit back there on the backside of that and you're like, God, my marriage is just in a total disaster, but thank you because I know you have this. I'm in a financial trouble. Lord, thank you. I know it. You gave me a job. I am so grateful for this job, even if I don't like it. Thank you. It's meeting my needs. Thank you. Because when you come out on the other side of that, when you get over the mountains, over the struggles, through the hurts and the pains and the grieving and everything that comes onto you, now God says, now I want you to take that pain and I want you to go love somebody else that's going through it. And see, King Nebuchadnezzar had to learn that process really well, because by the end, King Nebuchadnezzar was changed. And he became to exalt God and be faithful to God and trust God. And it's the same thing that happens in our lives. It's the same thing. God is like, look, you might be going through some struggles, but man, go face down in front of me. Have faith in me. Trust me that I know the end game. And you're a piece of the end game. You're not a mistake. You're not just something that just happened. Like I knew that well before you. Where he says, look, I promise not to hurt you or harm you, but give you prosperity. That's where God wants us. And if we could just close our eyes for just a second as we go to close.